Hello guys and gals, and welcome back to The Little Giant Book of Whodunits by Conrad and illustrated by Matt LaFleur. Now, that song was just an excerpt from Spider Dance from the Undertale soundtrack. It plays during the Muffet fight, and it is really a fine fight. Anyways, we are on episode 10, and that's going to be the last episode. There are 8 mysteries left for us to solve, and then this series is done. So, excuse me. Now, anyways, let's get on with it then. In the last episode, we were let me check my notes here. Oh yeah, the videotape suspect. That one was really fascinating. Anyways, we are going to start off with a Maid-Made Discovery. And I am charging my phone currently, so it's probably going to come unplugged a few times. At some point during the small party, Hazel grew tired of dealing with the guests. They all had drinks in hand and seemed perfectly content, so the maid wandered up the grand staircase to check on the sleeping children and do a little tidying up. As soon as Hazel walked into her employer's bedroom, her eagle eyes saw that someone had been there. Taking a towel from her apron, she eradicated the quarter-sized water ring from a mahogany table. "How many times do I have to tell Miss Grant to use a coaster?" she asked the empty air. Seconds later, a breeze from an open French window drew her outside. Young Davy's skateboard was on the balcony, right by the railing's edge. "Somebody could trip and fall," Hazel said with another disapproving cluck. Instinctively, she peered down over the railing and was startled to see her prophecy fulfilled. Her employer, the Broadway star, Indira Grant, lay on the flagstone walk, her beautiful neck broken, but her cut crystal water glass still in one piece in her outstretched hand. The guests were devastated by the tragic accident. Indira's husband, George, refilled his brandy snifter twice before his hand was steady enough to dial up the police. They'll be here in 5 minutes, he announced. Brent Overton, Indira's latest co-star, seemed just as inconsolable. All night he'd been drinking shot glasses of whiskey, but the tragic accident sobered him instantly. Indira's understudy, Martina Welsh, had never held much affection for the star, especially since Indira had never once missed a performance. But now Martina put down her beer mug and became the picture of solicitude and mourning. Whatever we do, we mustn't ever let poor Davy know it was his skateboard that made his mother slip. "It wasn't the skateboard," Hazel muttered darkly. "Miss Grant was pushed over the railing, and I know who did it." How did Hazel know, how did Hazel know it wasn't an accident? Whom does she suspect and why? Okay, and the answer is on page 325. And let me plug my phone back in because it came unplugged. I need to use my new cable. Let me put the thing in here. Let's put the bookmark in, put a pin in it, as they say in Bolt. 325, I think it was. Oh, I went past it. A Maid-Made Discovery. Here it is. If Indira had tripped on the skateboard, it would have wound up right by the railing. It would not have wound up right by the railing. It would have been pushed backwards. Unfortunately, Hazel accidentally destroyed the most telling piece of evidence, the water ring on the table. The offending glass had been the size of a quarter, much too small for a crystal water glass, a brandy snifter, or a beer mug. It's just the right size for a shot glass, however. The killer had to be Brent Overton. Okay. Next up, we have Fooling the Foolproof Alarm. Okay. Now, my phone keeps unplugged again. Okay. After the theft of a medieval goblet, collector Felix Cheshire became obsessed with security. He improved his alarm system by installing metallic strips on the rear of all his canvases and other art objects. He didn't even trust his two longtime assistants. His latest precaution was to carry a loaded pistol and a sword hidden inside his walking cane. As usual, Felix began his day by ushering in his assistants and setting the alarm. He had barely entered the rear research room when the alarm sounded. Grabbing his gun and cane, Felix hobbled up to the entrance and found Tanya Garfield standing by the door, a sheepish grin on her face. "I was just going out for coffee," she apologized. "I guess my earring set it off." The collector checked his major possessions. Okay. The collector checked his major possessions, found nothing missing, then reset the alarm. He settled back into the research room and accepted a cup of tea from the earringless Tanya. Felix had no idea for how long he'd nodded off, but suddenly Jack, the other assistant, was shaking him by the shoulders. "It's gone!" Jack shouted. "The Da Vinci's gone!" Jack led the way to a side gallery and pointed to the small empty frame. A razor on the floor gave mute testimony to how the priceless drawing was removed. I was working in the front, Tanya. Tanya was in one of the middle rooms. I came in here to consult the Iliad Codex, and using his cane, Felix hobbled to the front gallery and out the door. His gun set off the alarm. "Stay here." It's hard to manage this book. "Stay here." Okay, where was I? "Stay here," he ordered, then locked his employees in and telephoned the police. Hours later, the two assistants were putting the distraught man to bed. The police searched everywhere. The old collector moaned as Tanya took his cane and Jack began taking off his shoes. The alarm was on. No one could have removed the drawing without setting it off. The thief suppressed a smile and tried to look as concerned as Felix's other assistant. How could the drawing have been removed, and who is the most likely suspect? The answer's on page 316. Let's put the thing in here. Okay, 316. After the first alarm, Felix checked his major possessions, and the Da Vinci was still there. The only other time the drawing could have been removed was during the second alarm, the one Felix personally set off. Felix himself could have unwittingly carried out the Da Vinci, rolled up and wrapped around the sword inside his hollow cane. Most likely suspect would be Tanya, who A, gave him the cup of tea and lulled him to sleep, and B, took possession of the cane as they were putting him to bed. She would have plenty of time to remove the painting from the cane after Felix went to bed. Okay, and up next we have Death in the Woods. By a bear, it looks like. Gotta watch out for them bears. Okay. It was a peaceful afternoon. Dr. Ben Kramer's guests were roaming his country estate, enjoying themselves until a series of growls and screams pierced the air. Robert Kelly grabbed a rifle from the den and followed the sounds, only to find the good doctor being mauled by a bear. A shot in the air scared the animal off. "Go get Ben's medical bag," Jory Abrams said as he bent over their unconscious host. From Ben's half-full basket, they could tell he'd been gathering wild strawberries. Ursula Abrams and Rebecca Kelly returned together, having found the bag in their host's bedroom. Ursula, a nurse, took over, administering a vial of smelling salts. It was no use. Seconds later, Ben Kramer convulsed and died. The local sheriff arrived and was about to call it an accident when he found a note caught on a thorny bush not far from the attack. It looked like... I wonder what it looked like. It looked like a list of reminders. Be first to attend BK after attack. Death must look natural. Do everything to avoid autopsy. Seek quick cremation. The sheriff decided to investigate. Handwriting samples were taken from all four of the guests. "This is ridiculous," Ursula said that evening as the two couples sat over a solemn dinner in the dead man's house. "There's no way anyone could plan a bear attack. Plus, none of us were anywhere near Ben." The women had taken over the cooking, following the recipes Ben had laid out. "I didn't feel right about mixing his wild strawberries in the fruit tart," Rebecca sniffed. Didn't seem right. Besides, Robert's terribly allergic. No one touched the dessert. Well, someone must have been out there, Jory argued. The note didn't appear by magic. Maybe they'll be able to match the handwriting. But the note was written in block letters, and there is no positive match. There also seemed to be no motive. The doctor had been generous to a fault, and it was actually difficult not to take advantage of him. The police never solved this one, can you? Who killed Dr. Kramer and how? Okay, the answer is on page 311. Okay, let's put a thing in here and go to page 311. Okay, I went past the page 311. Here we go. Death in the woods. Once it's realized that the note in the woods belonged to Ben, the crime becomes less mysterious. The initials didn't stand for Ben Kramer, but Bob Kelly. Dr. Kramer had been intending to kill Bob Kelly by feeding his friend a tart filled with wild strawberries. Then when Bob had an allergic attack, the doctor was planning to revive him with the poisoned smelling salts. Death would be blamed on the fruit. Ben was unwittingly killed by the murder weapon he had prepared for someone else. Okay. So the smelling salts were poisoned. Okay. Okay, so next we have murder works overtime. See, I have my list here of all of them. So for when I put these on YouTube, I'll have them in the description. Roger Vale was having a bad day. First off, the advertising executive spilled coffee all over the back of the roller chair in his redecorated office, resulting in a permanent stain. Then his computer went haywire. With his hard drive gone, Roger had to stay late to complete a report, and to top it off, while he was working late, he was shot 3 times in the back and killed. Okay, that would be a bad time. Yeah, he was in for a bad time. To quote Sans from Undertale, when the cleaning woman entered Roger's office that night, she thought it was empty. The chair back faced her, a virtual wall of beige. Her expert eyes quickly noticed the 3 tiny blemishes on the fabric, 3 little round holes. She came closer, rolling the chair away from the broken computer and towards the light. Roger Vale's corpse slumped forward, the holes in his back matching the bullet holes pumped into the chair. Roger's death shocked his colleagues. Everybody liked him, Joan Jackson sighed. The next morning, as she watered her flowers. If there was a murder here, I would have expected. She left it unfinished, piquing the curiosity of the interrogating officer. Blakemore advertising, it turned out, was a hotbed of seething emotion. Joan, for example, was having a feud with her creative partner, Elsa Gripper. Just the day before, the two of them had come to blows, resulting in Joan's dramatic black eye. And then there was Sammy Frick. On the very day of the murder, Sammy had loudly threatened to kill Ori Kendale, the man who Sammy felt had cheated him out of a much-deserved promotion. Ori occupied the office right next to the victim. He tried to make light of the company squabbles, but he was definitely nervous. Tempers flare in the advertising world, but no one really means it. The executive rested his arm over the top of his chair, as if trying to hide the brown stain that poured down the tall chair back. Ori knows more than he's saying, the homicide captain muttered. I think I know what happened. What does the captain think happened? Who killed Roger Vale? Answers on page 327, but first of all, we're going to put a little bookmark in here and go to page 327 and have a look-see. The victim had not been killed in his own chair. That fact, combined with the chair's high backing design and Vale's broken computer, led the captain to the following theory. Vale stayed late since his computer was broken. He had to finish his report on Ori Kendale's computer. When the killer entered Kendale's office, he fired through the chair back without getting a clear view of the victim. After realizing he'd shot the wrong man, the killer rolled the corpse into Vale's office and replaced the bullet-riddled chair with Vale's coffee-stained duplicate. Kendale also noticed the chair exchange and came to the same conclusion. The killer was probably the enemy was probably his enemy, Sammy Frick. What the frick, man? You shouldn't kill people. Okay, and next we have Two Places at Once. Yep. Two Places at Once. It's harder to keep this book open as it goes. Okay. All evidence pointed to Frank Fortini. He had motive, the homicide told his men. Frank's uncle Gregor, the victim, just won the state lottery. Frank and his brother are Gregor's only relatives and would have inherited the $14 million prize. Also, Frank had opportunity. Gregor was a paranoid guy living in an isolated cabin. He always kept his doors locked and hated strangers. Since there was no forced entry and no sign of a struggle, we know Gregor was attacked by someone he knew and trusted. To top it off, we found direct evidence at the cabin. There were fresh tire tracks perfectly matching the tires from Frank's mountain bike. And the chief was getting angry. And we found a ticket. From today's lottery near the scene with Frank's prints on it. The only trouble is, the chief pounded the table, he has an alibi. On the night Gregor was killed, Frank was breaking into Avalon Hardware. Normally there'd be nothing to steal, but the store manager neglected to take the day's receipts to the bank. An alert patrolman looked through the window and saw Frank prying open the cash register. The coroner said Gregor was killed at the same time. Frank was being read his rights. Frank's a petty robber. Frank's a petty robber. Jake Fortini later told the police, in his brother's defense, he'd steal the pennies from your loafers. You could count on it, but he'd never kill. Frank's other brother was a teller at Avalon's only bank. I saw Frank right after I got off work, said Emil Fortini. We had a couple drinks. Frank seemed a little hard up for money, but that was normal. Frank had little to say in his own defense. I keep my bike in an unlocked garage. Anyone could have used it. And as for my uncle, I haven't been up to his cabin in a week. Homicide chief scratched his head. I don't have any hard evidence, but I have a pretty good idea who did it and how the murder was committed. What was the chief's theory? Solution on page 344. So let's go to page 344 and check this out. Wait, put a bookmark in first. There we go. 344. Here we are. Two places at once. Frank couldn't be the killer, and yet the tire treads and the discarded ticket pointed right at him. Since Frank's brothers shared the same motive and the same opportunity, the chief reason that one of them killed Gregor and was trying to pin it on Frank. How did Frank know that the store receipts would still be in the register on that particular night? Email the chief recalled. Email the chief recalled was a teller at the town's only bank. He mentioned to Frank that the hardware store manager had not come in that day, knowing that Frank couldn't resist such an easy score. While Frank was out robbing, Emil was out killing. When the police found the clues and arrested Frank, Emil figured that his brother would be without an alibi. He never figured on Frank getting caught. Okay, so that makes perfect sense. Now, next is Dead End Stoolie. It was a cloudy Sunday when the skies threatened rain all morning. The showers anticipated in the afternoon. So Detective Wilson didn't really mind when he was called into work. A tourist had gotten himself lost in an industrial section of town. At the very end of a dead-end alley, the poor visitor came across the body of Vinny the Fish, a Stoolie, who had been supplying Detective Wilson with information on several ongoing mob investigations. Both kneecaps busted, the on-scene officer said as he pointed to the corpse crumbled up against the blank wall. Chest cavity was crushed in two. We'll know more when the medical examiner arrives. Wilson didn't wait for the ME. Instead, he looked up the address of three of Vinny's associates and drove off to see them. Someone had found out about Vinny's cooperation. Wilson felt he owed it to the Stoolie to find his killer. Gummy Moran was on the street in front of his modest brick row house, washing his car. Gummy shrugged off the news of Vinny's death and kept chewing his ever-present wad of gum. He probably got mugged. Don't waste your time on this loser. Go back to catching mobsters. And he laughed. Wilson found his second suspect at the clubhouse the mob had built for the neighborhood baseball diamond. Ricky Fricker was in the equipment room checking bats for cracks and oiling gloves. It's volunteer work, he said smugly. You should try it. Look, I'm sorry about poor Vinny, but I barely knew the guy. Sean Monahan was a little harder to find, but Wilson eventually tracked him to the Oak Shillelagh, an Irish restaurant. My sources tell me old Vinny bought the farm, he said as soon as Wilson walked in. Wilson knew all about Monahan's sources, some of whom were probably inside Wilson's department. Why are you wasting time on Vinny's death? Was he stooling for you? Don't worry about my time. I know how to concentrate my energies. There's only one suspect I'm really interested in. Whom does Wilson suspect and why? So we go to page 310 after I bookmark this. Dead in Stoolie. The Stoolie had been found against the wall of a lonely, dead-end alley. Detective Wilson left the crime scene before the murder weapon had been determined, but the unusual behavior of one of the suspects led him to a theory on how Vinny met his end. It had been threatening rain all day, and yet, when Wilson approached Gummy Moran, the mobster was washing his car. No one washes his car when rain is expected, not unless he wants to remove evidence in a vehicular homicide. Okay, next we have a lapse in security. Okay. Preparations were all in place for the Peace Treaty Summit. Nary a twig was out of place in the secluded wooded retreat. The service staff had been cleared by security, and the entire compound was off-limit to motor vehicles until the dignitaries started arriving in their limousines. Security Chief Derek Gerber was making a final tour on his bicycle. What if an assassin had somehow managed to get in? Gerber's suspicious mind focused on one of the newly hired staff. He decided to run another check. An hour later, Gerber's body was discovered in a ravine. Gil Abel, the security chief's assistant, was immediately notified. Abel cycled up the main road, noting with irritation a shaggy black piece of bloody roadkill along the shoulder, being toyed with by a kitchen cat. 20 yards later, he was at the ravine. Gerber had put up quite a struggle before succumbing to a flurry of stab wounds. I've had my own suspicions, Abel mumbled to himself. I suppose it's time to check them out. Pearl Weimar, head chef, had been hired by special request of the French delegate. I've been here in the kitchen all morning, she told Abel as she sharpened knives on a whetstone. You'll probably find out. At the last conference, I worked there with an... So she's... Wait a minute, I'm trying to focus here. So wait a minute, she's sharpening knives and he was stabbed. Okay, I'm already a little bit suspicious of her. She told, okay, I've been here in the kitchen all morning, she told Abel as she sharpened knives on a whetstone. You'll probably find out at the last conference I worked, there was an assassination, unsolved. Abel knew this. That's why she was on his list. Abel located Edgar Vicky, director of protocol, in his room. Edgar seated the security chief out of view of the two empty wig stands on the dresser. He doesn't want me to know, Abel thought, with amusement as he gazed at the dark, obvious toupee mounted on the fuzzy little man's head. Edgar claimed to have been taking a walk. I was on the far side of the compound. I didn't hear or see a thing. The third suspect was Avril Alsace, the groundskeeper. I was by the south fence, raking pine needles by the conference center. I saw Gerber cycling by. He waved and circled the building, but he didn't stop. Whodunit And what piece of evidence implicated the killer? I'm thinking it was the toupee that they found in the thing. But 322. Let's see. 322. Went past it. A lapse in security. Two oddities caught Abel's attention. Nary a twig was out of place in the wooded compound, and there was no vehicular traffic. So how does one account for a shaggy, bloody piece of roadkill? Two, why are both of Edgar's wig stands empty? Yeah, that's what I thought. Abel went back to the road just in time to stop the cat from demolishing the blood-covered toupee. Edgar Vicky was the assassin. During the struggle with Gerber, the victim tore off Edgar's wig. Since Edgar could no longer wear the bloody toupee, he disposed of it in the woods. It had been dragged up to the road by a roaming cat. So I did kind of figure that one out. Okay, now Alibi at Sea will be the last one that we have. This is the last mystery there is, and this will be the end for the book. During the storm at sea, millionaire art lover C. Michael Ection popped out on the deck of his luxurious yacht. He didn't hear a thing as his killer sneaked up behind him, brandishing a deadly sharp letter opener. Moments later, after the murder, his body was pushed overboard, disappearing into the swirling foam. When the skies cleared and the yacht pulled into harbor, police questioned the three surviving passengers. Michael's stylishly dressed wife, Sprinkle Ection, his secretary, Maury Ficient, I get it, and a shifty-eyed art dealer named Count Yuri Seats, I get it. Each suspect had an alibi. I was in the lounge doing my nails, Sprinkle told them. The widow stuffed her hands into her pockets, the pockets of her Dior dressing gown. The police immediately noticed a wet patch on her robe in her robe front. In the middle of the wet patch was a stubborn red stain that had refused to come out. So it's either nail polish or blood. I was in my cabin writing, Count Yuri said as he showed the police a neatly written 5-page letter, all in Russian. To my dear mother, the Countess, he explained. A translation of the letter proved that Yuri had indeed written to his mother, a cleaning lady living in Bensonhurst. Maury, the secretary, claimed to be opening correspondence in the yacht's office at the time of the murder. The envelopes were all torn open. I couldn't find the letter opener, he said, with an embarrassing shrug. The police noticed a fresh gash on Maury's right wrist. What happened? This happened when I stumbled. I cut myself on one of Mr. Ection's glass sculptures. The police had yet to investigate motive, but already they see that one of the three alibis doesn't hold water, as opposed to Michael, who is holding several gallons by the time they fish him out of the Atlantic. Whodunit? The solution is on page 302. And let's read this out. Alibi at Sea. Count your receipts. No one could have written a neat 5-page letter during a storm at sea. Yuri had obviously written the letter earlier and was using it as an alibi. Sprinkle's alibi is plausible. If she had been trying to do her nails during a storm, the polish might have spilled, leaving the red stain on her robe. Plus, her manicure might have turned out so badly that she would try and hide her hands. There was also nothing wrong with Maury's alibi. The gash on his wrist could have been the result of an accident caused by the violent rocking of the boat. As for the missing letter opener, anyone could have walked into the office and stolen it. Yuri eventually confessed he had been selling the millionaire forged paintings. Action had grown suspicious. As soon as they reached port, he was going to have the paintings examined by an independent expert. And that was the last story. So, we are done with this book. This has been a reading from the Little Giant Book of Whodunits by Conrad. And so yeah, if you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. And if you want to, If you want, and if you want to support me in any way at all that information is in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day. Please hold just a sec.